The fog hung low over Crestwood that crisp autumn afternoon, curling around the rolling hills like a soft grey blanket. Officer Elena Harper leaned against her patrol car, her breath puffing in small clouds as she scanned the quiet highway stretching through the town. Crestwood was a sleepy place, nestled between dense forests and golden fields, where the most excitement usually came from a deer darting across the road. Elena loved it here, loved the stillness, the way the seasons painted the landscape, and the rhythm of her daily patrols. With her sharp instincts and quiet dedication, she'd earned a reputation as the officer who noticed what others missed. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to encounter on this ordinary Tuesday. It started with a flicker of movement, a rusted grey sedan barreling past a stop sign, its tires skidding on the damp pavement. Elena's brow furrowed as she straightened up, her hand instinctively brushing the radio clipped to her belt. Routine traffic violations weren't uncommon, especially with the fog making folks careless, but there was something about the car's urgency that tugged at her gut. She climbed into her cruiser, flicked on the lights and eased onto the road, the siren's wail cutting through the misty silence. A few hundred yards ahead, the sedan slowed reluctantly, pulling onto the gravel shoulder with a crunch that echoed in the stillness. Elena parked a safe distance behind, her hazel eyes narrowing as she studied the vehicle. The sedan was old, its paint chipped and streaked with mud, the rear bumper sagging like it hadn't seen a mechanic in years. She stepped out, her boots crunching against the gravel, and adjusted her cap, her hand resting lightly on her holster, a habit born from years of training, not paranoia. The air smelled of wet leaves and exhaust, and as she approached the driver's side, she caught the faint outline of a man hunched over the wheel, his hands gripping it so tightly, his knuckles gleamed white through the fogged-up window. "Good afternoon," Elena began, her voice firm but warm, the kind of tone that invited cooperation without demanding it. "Do you know why I stopped you?" The driver didn't look up. His head stayed low, his shoulders stiff, and his silence stretched just a beat too long. Elena tilted her head, her instincts prickling. Up close, she could see his wiry frame, the unkempt beard shadowing his jaw, and the way his fingers twitched against the steering wheel. He mumbled something, a garbled excuse about the fog, but before she could press him, a sound stopped her cold. It was faint at first, so soft she almost missed it beneath the hum of her idling cruiser, a high-pitched, trembling meow drifting from the back seat. Elena's heart skipped, her gaze snapping to the rear window. The fog made it hard to see, but there, curled in a tight, shivering ball, was a cat. Its fur was a patchy mess of grey and white, matted with dirt, and its wide, frightened eyes locked onto hers through the glass. The meow came again, weaker this time, a desperate plea that sent a shiver racing down Elena's spine. Her face paled as she took in the sight. The cat's ribs jutted beneath its thin coat, and a crude twine collar bit into its neck, leaving raw, red marks. "What's in the back seat?" Elena asked, her tone sharpening as she stepped closer, her hand hovering near the door. The driver, Victor Grayson, she'd later learn, finally met her gaze, his sunken eyes darting with panic. "Hey, it's just a cat," he muttered, his voice barely audible, cracking under the weight of her stare. "Found it on the road, was gonna take it somewhere." His words stumbled over each other, too quick, too rehearsed, and Elena's chest tightened. She'd seen nervous drivers before, but this was different. There was fear here and something darker lurking beneath it. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," she said, her voice steady now, cutting through the fog like a blade. Victor hesitated, his hands trembling as they lingered on the wheel. For a moment she thought he might bolt, but he finally complied, pushing the door open with a groan of rusty hinges. He stood there, wiry and unsteady, his gaze flicking between Elena and the cat in the back. She gestured for him to move to the front of the car, keeping him in her peripheral as she leaned toward the rear window again. The cat, Whisper she'd call it later, stared back, its eyes huge and glassy, silently begging for help. Elena's mind raced as she pieced it together. The cat's condition, malnourished, injured, terrified, didn't match Victor's flimsy story, Found on the road? No stray looked this broken, this deliberately neglected. Her fingers brushed her radio, ready to call it in, but her focus stayed on Whisper. The cat shifted slightly, its frail body trembling as it tried to press itself closer to the glass, as if it knew she was its lifeline. Elena's throat tightened, a surge of protectiveness washing over her. Whatever had driven this tiny creature to such desperation, she wouldn't let it stay hidden. "Sir," she said, turning back to Victor, her voice low and firm, "you're going to tell me the truth about that cat. Right now." His mouth opened, then closed, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. The fog thickened around them, muffling the world beyond, but Elena barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to this moment: the rusted sedan, the nervous man, and the faint, heartbreaking meows from the back seat. She didn't know it yet, but this traffic stop wasn't just a routine call. It was the spark of something bigger, something that would test her courage and change lives, starting with the fragile cat trembling behind the glass. Victor shifted, uncomfortably, his boots scuffing the gravel, and Elena's patience thinned. She could feel the weight of Whisper's gaze, a silent cry that drowned out the excuses forming on Victor's lips. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over him, and repeated, "The truth. Now." Whatever came next, Elena knew one thing. For certain, she wasn't leaving this highway without that cat, and without answers. Victor Grayson stood frozen under Elena's unwavering gaze, his wiry frame silhouetted against the thickening fog. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he shifted, his eyes darting toward the sedan's back seat, where the faint meows persisted. Officer Elena Harper's demand for the truth hung heavy in the air, her voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in her mind. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the rusted car, the nervous man, and the fragile creature trembling behind the glass. Something was terribly wrong, and she was determined to uncover it. Found it. "On the road," Victor repeated, his voice cracking like dry twigs underfoot. "I swear that's all there is to it." But his words rang hollow and Elena's eyes narrowed. She stepped past him, her boots deliberate against the gravel, and leaned closer to the rear window. The fog smeared the glass with a ghostly haze, but there it was, Whisper, as she'd already begun to think of the cat. The small grey and white bundle was curled tighter now, its matted fur clinging to its bony frame. Its ribs jutted out like the bars of a cage, and its wide glassy eyes locked onto Elena's with a silent, desperate plea that pierced her heart. Up close, the cat's condition was worse than she'd feared. The twine collar, crude and knotted, dug into its neck, leaving raw red welts that glistened faintly with blood. Patches of fur were missing, exposing pink, irritated skin, and its breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps. Elena's stomach churned as she took it all in, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. This wasn't the result of a day or two on the roadside. This was neglect, deliberate and prolonged. She straightened, her hazel eyes flashing as she turned back to Victor, who flinched under her scrutiny. "That's no stray," she said, her tone low and sharp, cutting through the foggy silence. "This cat's been starved, hurt. Look at that collar. You expect me to believe you just stumbled across it like this?" Victor's mouth opened, then snapped shut, his sunken cheeks twitching as he struggled for a reply. His hands fidgeted, tugging at the hem of his frayed jacket, and Elena caught the glint of sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. He was unraveling, and she wasn't about to let him off the hook. She circled back to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass as if she could reach through and comfort the trembling creature. Whisper shifted slightly, its frail body quivering as it tried to lift its head. Another weak meow escaped, softer this time, and Elena's throat tightened. "Hang on, little one," she murmured under her breath, barely audible over the hum of her cruiser's engine. She'd seen her share of tough cases in Crestwood, lost hikers, petty thefts, but nothing had ever tugged at her like this. Those eyes, so full of fear and trust, seemed to see right through her, pleading for rescue. Victor cleared his throat, his voice raspy as he tried again. "Look, I was going to take it to a shelter, okay? Didn't know what else to do." His words spilled out too fast, tripping over each other, and Elena's patience snapped. She whirled on him, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. "A shelter?" she echoed, her voice rising with disbelief. "This cat's half dead and you're telling me you were playing Good Samaritan. Try again, and this time make it good." His gaze dropped to the gravel, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of her stare was too much to bear. Elena's chest heaved with a mix of anger and protectiveness, her mind racing with possibilities. Was he a hoarder, a smuggler, something worse? The sedan's interior offered no clues, just a crumpled fast food bag and a stale smell of cigarette smoke. But Whisper's condition screamed of a story Victor wasn't telling. She glanced back at the cat, its trembling form etched into her memory, and made a silent promise. Whatever had brought it to this point, she'd get to the bottom of it. "Stay right there," she ordered, pointing at Victor as she reached for her radio. Her fingers brushed the device, ready to call in backup and animal control. But her eyes never left him. He shifted again, his boots scuffing the ground, and for a split second, she thought she saw his gaze flicker toward the woods lining the highway, a dark, tangled mass barely visible through the fog. Was he planning to run? Her hand tightened on the radio, her pulse quickening. She wasn't just dealing with a traffic stop anymore. This was something bigger, something that tied this broken cat to a man too scared to look her in the eye. Elena clicked the radio on, her voice calm but firm as she spoke. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harper. I've got a situation on Highway 12, possible animal neglect. Requesting animal control and backup at my location." The static crackled in response, a voice confirming her request, but her focus stayed on Victor. His head snapped up at the word neglect, his sunken eyes widening with a flicker of panic. "Wait, you don't—" he stammered, but Eleanor cut him off with a raised hand. "No more stories," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're not moving until I figure out what's really going on here." She stepped back toward the car, peering once more at Whisper. The cat's eyes followed her, a faint spark of hope glimmering amidst the fear, and Eleanor's resolve hardened. Whatever darkness had driven this tiny creature to such desperation, she'd shine a light on it. The fog might hide the world beyond, but it couldn't hide the truth, not from her. The fog seemed to thicken as Elena stood there, her radio crackling faintly with dispatch's confirmation. The highway stretched silent and grey around them, the world muffled beyond the rusted sedan and the trembling cat inside. Officer Elena Harper's gaze bore into Victor Grayson, her hazel eyes sharp with a mix of anger and determination. His stammered protest, "Wait, you don't—" hung unfinished in the air, cut off by her raised hand. She wasn't here for half-truths anymore. Whisper's frail form demanded answers, and Elena wasn't leaving without them. She stepped closer to Victor, her boots crunching the gravel with purpose, her voice dropping to a steely calm. "Let's try this again. That cat's not some roadside stray. You didn't just stumble across it looking like that. Starved, injured, tied up with twine, that's not an accident. So tell me right now what's really going on." Victor's sunken eyes flickered, his wiry frame tensing as if he might collapse under the weight of her words. His hands twitched at his sides, and Elena caught the sheen of sweat glistening on his brow, stark against the foggy chill. "I told you," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was gonna take it to a shelter. Found it like that, I swear." But his words crumbled under her scrutiny, brittle as the dried leaves skittering across the pavement. Elena's chest tightened, her mind flashing back to Whisper's wide, pleading eyes, eyes that had seen too much, that trusted her to make this right. She shook her head, her patience fraying like a worn thread. "You're lying," she said flatly, "and you're not good at it. That cat's been neglected for weeks, maybe longer. You know more than you're letting on." Victor's gaze darted to the sedan, then back to the woods, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. Helena followed his glance, her instincts flaring. The forest loomed dark and impenetrable through the fog, a perfect escape if he decided to bolt. She shifted her stance, planting herself between him and the trees, her hand resting lightly on her holster. "Don't even think about it," she warned, her tone low but firm. "You're not going anywhere until I get the truth." She turned slightly, keeping Victor in her peripheral as she peered once more into the back seat. Whisper hadn't moved much, its frail body still curled tight, But its meows grew fainter, more desperate, slicing through the silence like tiny cries for help. Eleanor's heart clenched as she noticed the twine collar again, crude and cruel, cutting deeper into the cat's neck with every shallow breath. She could almost feel the pain herself, a raw ache that fueled her resolve. "Look at it," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury as she pointed at the window. "Look at what you've done or let happen. You think I'm just going to let this slide?" Victor flinched, his shoulders hunching as if her words were physical blows. He mumbled something under his breath, too low to catch, and Eleanor leaned in, her patience snapping. "What was that? Speak up." His head jerked up, his eyes wide, with a flicker of panic that he couldn't hide. "I didn't do nothing to it," he blurted, his voice cracking. It's not mine, okay? I was just holding on to it." The confession spilled out jagged and rushed, and Elena's pulse quickened. Holding on to it. That wasn't the story he'd started with. Holding on to it for who? She pressed, stepping closer, her shadow falling over him. "You're not making sense, Victor. First it's a stray, now you're holding on to it? Which is it?" His mouth opened, then closed, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Eleanor could see the gears turning behind his sunken eyes, the panic rising as he realized he'd tripped over his own lies. She didn't give him time to recover. "That cat's suffering because of something you're tangled up in," she said, her voice rising. "And I'm not letting it go on a second longer. So talk." Victor's hands shot up, palms out as if to ward her off, his voice pitching higher. Okay. I found it, all right? But it wasn't just lying there. Someone gave it to me. Told for me to keep it quiet, that's all." Elena's brow furrowed, her mind racing. Someone gave it to him? The pieces didn't fit yet, but the admission cracked open a door she hadn't expected. "Who?" she demanded. "Who gave it to you? And why's it in this shape?" Victor's gaze dropped to the gravel again, his lips pressing into a thin, trembling line, and Elena knew she'd hit a wall, but not one she couldn't break. She reached for her radio again, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Dispatch, this is Harper. I've got a suspect admitting involvement in possible animal neglect. Need that animal control ETA and an additional unit for questioning." The static buzzed, and a voice crackled back. "Animal control's 5 minutes out, back up en route." Helena nodded to herself, her eyes never leaving Victor. 5 minutes, she could hold him that long, and she'd make sure Whisper got out of that car even sooner. "Step to the front of the car," she ordered, gesturing sharply with her free hand. "Hands on the hood now." Victor hesitated, his body rigid with indecision, and Elena's tone hardened. "Move." He shuffled forward, his reluctance palpable, and placed his trembling hands on the sedan's hood, the metal creaking under his weight. Elena kept him in her sights, her mind already shifting to the next step. Whatever someone had dragged Victor into, it had left Whisper broken and terrified, and Elena was going to find out why. The fog swirled around them, cloaking the highway in an eerie hush, but Elena barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to the sedan, the man crumbling under her questions, and the faint, heartbreaking meows from the back seat. Whisper's trust fueled her, a quiet strength that warmed her even as the mystery deepened. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning, a thread that would unravel into something far bigger than a single traffic stop. The fog draped Highway 12 in a heavy shroud, muffling the distant hum of approaching sirens as Officer Elena Harper stood, firm, her eyes locked on Victor Grayson. His hands trembled against the sedan's hood, the rusted metal groaning under his weight, but his gaze kept flickering toward the woods, a telltale sign that Eleanor couldn't ignore. The radio crackled with updates. Animal control 5 minutes. Out, back up en route. But time felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Whisper's faint meows echoed from the back seat, each one a quiet plea that steeled Elena's resolve. She wasn't just holding a line. She was holding a life. Victor's admission still hung in the air. "Someone gave it to me, told me to keep it quiet." A jagged shard of truth that only deepened the mystery. Eleanor's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The cat's dire condition, Victor's shifting lies, the panic in his sunken eyes. "Who?" She pressed again, her voice a low growl of frustration. "Who gave you that cat, and why is it half dead?" Victor's lips parted, his breath hitching, but no answer came. His silence was a wall, and Elena was ready to tear it down until he moved. It happened in a flash. Victor's hands slid off the hood, his wiry frame coiling like a spring, and before Elena could react, he bolted. His boots kicked up gravel. As he sprinted toward the woods, the fog swallowing him in seconds. "Stop!" Elena shouted, her voice slicing through the haze, but he didn't slow. Adrenaline surged through her, and she gave chase, her legs pumping as she closed the gap. The forest loomed ahead, its dark branches clawing at the sky, and she knew if he reached it, she'd lose him, and any chance of uncovering Whisper's story. Victor was fast, desperation lending him speed, but Elena's training and sheer determination were her edge. Her boots pounded the damp earth, her breath fogging in sharp bursts as she gained on him. The sedan faded into the mist behind her, but Whisper's wide, trusting eyes flashed in her mind, urging her on. She couldn't let him escape, not with what he knew, not with that cat's life hanging in the balance. The woods were steps away when she lunged, her arms wrapping around his waist in a tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. They hit the dirt hard, a tangle of limbs and grunts, the smell of wet leaves and sweat filling the air. Victor thrashed beneath her, his elbows flailing, but Elena pinned him down, her knee pressing into his back. "Why'd you run?" she demanded, her voice hoarse as she yanked his arms behind him. "What are you so scared of?" He didn't answer. His face pressed into the earth, his ragged breathing the only sound. Elena's chest heaved, her pulse pounding in her ears, but she held firm, her grip unyielding. She reached for her cuffs, the cold metal clicking as she secured his wrists. "You're not getting out of this," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Her radio buzzed against her hip, and she grabbed it with one hand, her other keeping Victor in place. "Dispatch, this is Harper. Suspect attempted to flee, apprehended. Need that backup now." The static crackled, a voice confirming, "Units 2 minutes out," and Elena exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. She hauled Victor to his feet, his head hanging low, and marched him back toward the sedan. The fog parted slightly as they emerged from the trees, the cruiser's red and blue lights pulsing faintly in the distance. Victor stumbled beside her, his resistance drained, but Elena's focus shifted back to the car. Whisper was still inside, alone and vulnerable, and the thought twisted her gut. She shoved Victor against the sedan's side, his cuffed hands scraping the metal, and ordered, "Stay put." He slumped there, defeated, as she turned to the back door, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled it open. The faint meow greeted her again, weaker now, and Elena's breath caught. Whisper lay curled in the same tight ball, its matted fur barely rising with each shallow breath. "Hey, little one," she whispered, her voice softening as she reached in. The cat's eyes flicked up, still wide and frightened, but there was something else there, a glimmer of recognition, of hope. Elena's heart ached as she slid her hands gently beneath its frail body, lifting it with the care she'd give a newborn. It was lighter than she'd expected, a fragile bundle of bones and fur, and she cradled it against her chest, shielding it from the cold. "You're okay now," she murmured, her cheek brushing Whisper's head as she stepped away from the car. The cat's trembling eased slightly, its tiny frame pressing into her warmth, and Elena felt a surge of protectiveness wash over her. Victor's head snapped up, his eyes darting between her and Whisper, and she shot him a glare that could have cut through steel. "This ends here," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Whatever you're hiding, I'm finding out, for this cat's sake." The distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the fog as backup closed in. Elena stood there, Whisper nestled in her arms, the weight of the moment settling over her. Victor's flight had confirmed her suspicions. He was tangled in something dark, something that had left this tiny creature broken. But as she felt Whisper's faint purr against her chest, a sound so soft it was almost imaginary, Elena knew she'd fight to make it right. The fog might obscure the road ahead, but it couldn't hide the path she was on now. Headlights pierced the haze as a patrol car screeched to a stop, officers spilling out with animal control close behind. Elena turned to meet them, her grip on Whisper steady, her resolve unshaken. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore, it was a lifeline, a promise, and the start of something she couldn't yet fathom. The fog pulsed with the glow of flashing lights as the patrol cars rolled in, their tires crunching gravel in a symphony of urgency. Officer Elena Harper stood by the rusted sedan, her arms cradling Whisper. The frail cat nestled against her chest. The tiny creature's faint purr vibrated through her uniform, a fragile thread of trust that warmed her despite the chill seeping through the mist. Victor Grayson slumped against the car, his cuffed hands limp, his sunken eyes avoiding her glare. The sirens faded to a low hum as officers swarmed the scene, but Eleanor's world had narrowed to the trembling life she held and the promise she'd made to protect it. She shifted Whisper gently, her fingers brushing the matted fur as she murmured, "You're safe now, little one, I've got you." The cat's wide eyes blinked up at her, glassy with exhaustion, but there was a flicker of relief there, a silent thank you that tightened Elena's throat. Up close, the extent of Whisper's injuries was stark. The twine collar had left raw, oozing welts, and its bony frame felt like it might snap under the slightest pressure. She pressed it closer, shielding it from the cold wind whipping through the fog, her anger at Victor simmering just beneath her resolve. Footsteps approached, and Elena glanced up to see Officer Daniels, a burly man with a familiar nod, taking charge of Victor. "We've got him," Daniels said, his voice gruff as he gripped Victor's arm. "You okay, Harper?" Elena nodded, her focus still on Whisper. "Yeah, but this cat needs help, fast." Daniels gave her a quick once-over, then jerked his head toward the arriving animal control van, its white frame cutting through the haze. "They're here. Let's get this sorted." The van's door slid open, and a woman stepped out, her dark hair tied back in a practical bun. "Officer Harper?" she called, her tone brisk yet warm. Elena met her halfway, Whisper still, cradled in her arms. "That's me, this is Whisper," she said, the name slipping out naturally. The woman, Maya Torres, according to the badge pinned to her jacket, peered at the cat, her expression shifting from professional calm to quiet dismay. "Oh, sweetheart," Maya murmured, reaching out a gloved hand to gently stroke Whisper's head. "What happened to you?" "Neglect, at least," Elena replied, her voice tight. "Maybe worse. The driver, Victor Grayson, claims he found it, but he ran when I pushed him. He's hiding something." Maya's brow furrowed as she assessed Whisper, her fingers pausing over the twine collar. "This is bad. Malnutrition, dehydration, and this collar's been on too long. We need to get it to a vet now. I don't think it has much time without care." Elena's stomach dropped, but she nodded, her grip on Whisper tightening protectively. "Do it. Whatever it needs." Maya pulled a soft carrier from the van, its padded interior a stark contrast to the sedan's grim back seat. Elena hesitated, reluctant to let go, but Maya's steady gaze reassured her. "I'll take good care of it, promise," she said, her voice softening. Elena carefully transferred Whisper, her hands lingering as the cat settled into the carrier with a faint, exhausted meow. "Hang in there," she whispered, her fingers brushing the cat's ear one last time before Maya secured the latch. The carrier disappeared into the van, and Elena felt a pang of loss, tempered by the hope that Whisper was finally in safe hands. She turned back to the scene where Daniels and another officer were loading Victor into a patrol car. His head hung low, his earlier defiance drained, but Elena wasn't done with him. She strode over, her boots firm against the gravel, and leaned in as the door swung open. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and fierce. "That cat's fighting to survive because of whatever you're caught up in. You're going to tell us everything starting now." Victor's eyes flicked up, a spark of fear igniting behind the exhaustion, but he said nothing as the door slammed shut. Maya approached, her clipboard in hand, and gave Elena a small, appreciative nod. "Thanks for stepping in, Officer Harper. Most people would have looked the other way." Elena shook her head, her gaze drifting to the van where Whisper rested. "Not with those eyes looking at me. It didn't give me a choice." Maya smiled faintly, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "We'll get it to the vet in town, Dr. Ellis. I'll keep you updated. You've got a good heart for this." Elena managed a tired smile, the weight of the day settling over her. "Just doing my job. Let me know how it's doing, okay?" Maya nodded, climbing into the van as the engine rumbled to life. The vehicle pulled away, its taillights fading into the fog, and Elena watched until it was gone, a quiet prayer lingering in her mind. Whisper had a chance now, a real one, and that was enough to keep her going. Daniels clapped her shoulder, breaking her reverie. "Captain's gonna want a report on this. Grayson's clammed up, but we'll crack him at the station. You coming?" Eleanor glanced at the sedan, its back door still ajar, then at the woods where Victor had tried to vanish. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady. "But this isn't just about him. There's more to this. I can feel it." Daniels raised an eyebrow but didn't argue, and together they headed for the cruiser, the fog swirling around them like a living thing. As the patrol car rolled toward the station, Eleanor's thoughts stayed with Whisper, the tiny cat who'd turned a routine stop into something unforgettable. Its trust had ignited something in her, a fire she couldn't ignore. Whatever Victor was hiding, whatever had broken Whisper so badly she'd uncover it. The fog might cloak the truth, but Elena Harper was a beacon in the dark, and she wasn't stopping until Whisper's story was told. The Crestwood police station buzzed with the quiet hum of late afternoon, the fog outside pressing against the windows like a persistent ghost. Officer Elena Harper sat across from Victor Grayson in the dimly lit interrogation room, her arms crossed, her hazel eyes unwavering. The metal table between them gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light, reflecting Victor's hunched figure. Cuffs, glinting on his wrists, his unkempt beard shadowing a face etched with defeat. Whisper was safe now, Elena reminded herself, tucked away with Maya and the vet. But the cat's trembling form still haunted her, fueling the fire in her chest. She needed answers, and Victor was the key. Detective Noah Sullivan leaned against the wall, his sharp features softened by a calm that contrasted Elena's intensity. He joined her from the precinct's investigative unit, his notepad ready, his presence a steady anchor as they prepared to crack Victor open. "Let's start simple," Elena said, her voice firm but measured. "You said someone gave you that cat Whisper and told you to keep it quiet. Who was it, and why?" Victor's sunken eyes darted between her and Noah, his fingers twitching. Against the table, the silence stretched thick and heavy, until Eleanor leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "That cat was starving hurt because of you or someone else. You ran for a reason. Talk." Victor's shoulders slumped, his breath escaping in a shaky rasp. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Elena's brow furrowed, but she held her tongue, letting him unravel. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was just holding it, like I said, for them." Noah scribbled a note, his pen scratching softly, and Elena pressed, "Them? Who's them?" Victor swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to his cuffed hands. "Guys I worked with. A while back. They gave it to me a few weeks ago, said it was leftovers, told me to deal with it." "Leftovers," Elena echoed, her stomach twisting. The word landed like a stone, cold and wrong. "You mean Whisper was part of something they didn't need anymore?" Victor nodded faintly, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, they bred cats, rare ones, sold them for big money. I used to help out, move stuff, keep quiet, but it shut down months ago, or so I thought. Then they showed up with this one, said it wasn't worth keeping, told me to get rid of it." Eleanor's hands clenched into fists beneath the table, her nails digging into her palms. "Get rid of it," she repeated, her voice low and furious. "So you just let it suffer instead?" Victor flinched, his head jerking up. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't sell it, couldn't dump it. I kept it in my garage, fed it what I could, but..." His words trailed off, guilt pooling in his eyes, and Eleanor's anger flared hotter. "Fed it what you could? It's skin and bones, Victor? You let it waste away because you were scared?" Noah stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Let's back up. You're saying this was an illegal breeding operation, rare cats for profit, and they're still active?" Victor hesitated, then nodded, his reluctance palpable. Yeah, they've got people, big people, buying. I don't know. Names, just places, drop-offs. They gave me the cat because it didn't turn out right. Too small, too weak. Said it was my problem now. Eleanor's mind raced, the pieces clicking into place. Whisper wasn't just a victim of neglect. It was evidence of something darker, something sprawling. Where's this operation now? Noah asked, his pen poised. Victor shifted uncomfortably, his voice dropping to a whisper. I don't know everything. They move around, warehouses, barns, but I wrote stuff down in a notebook in the car, addresses, times. I didn't want to forget in case... He trailed off, and Elena's pulse quickened. A notebook. She exchanged a glance with Noah, who nodded subtly, already on the same page. We'll get it, he said, stepping toward the door. Keep him here. Elena stayed put, her eyes boring into Victor as Noah slipped out to retrieve the evidence. Why'd you run, Victor? She asked, her tone softer now, probing. If you were just holding it, why bolt? His head hung lower, his voice a broken murmur. They'd kill me if they knew I talked. They don't mess around. People disappear. I panicked when you called it in. The confession hung heavy, a chilling thread that wove Whisper's suffering into a tapestry of fear and greed. Elena's chest tightened, but beneath the anger a flicker of warmth grew. Whisper had survived this, and now it had a chance. Noah returned minutes later, a small weathered notebook in hand. He flipped it open, revealing pages scrawled with cryptic notes, dates, locations, initials. One entry caught Elena's eye. Pickup point, Old Mill Lane. Her breath hitched. This is it, she said, tapping the page. This is where we start. Noah nodded, his jaw set. Captain's already on board, we'll check it out. Could be the break we need. Elena stood, her chair scraping the floor, her mind already racing ahead. Good, but first, I need to know Whisper's okay. She stepped into the hall, pulling out her phone to call Maya. The line rang twice before Maya's voice came through, tired but warm. Eleanor? Whisper's at Dr. Ellis's now, stable, but it's touch and go. They're cleaning the wounds, starting fluids. It's a fighter, though. Elena exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her. Thanks, Maya, keep me posted. She hung up, the image of Whisper's trusting eyes steadying her. That cat had sparked this, had led her here, and she wouldn't let it down. Back in the room, Victor sat silent, his confession a fragile bridge to something bigger. Eleanor looked at him, then at the notebook in Noah's hands, her resolve hardening. You're coming with us, she told Victor, her voice steady, and you're helping us end this, for Whisper's sake. The fog might still cloak Crestwood, but a light was breaking through, one fueled by a tiny cat's courage and a promise Elena intended to keep. The fog had begun to lift as dusk settled over Crestwood, the rolling hills glowing faintly under a bruised purple sky. Officer Elena Harper stood outside the station, the weathered notebook from Victor's car clutched in her hand, its cryptic scrawl a map to answers she couldn't yet see. Inside, Victor Grayson sat under Detective Noah Sullivan's watchful eye, his confession still echoing in her mind. An illegal breeding operation, rare cats sold for profit, and Whisper as its fragile survivor. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the tiny cat, fighting for life at Dr. Ellis's clinic, and a quiet fire burned in her chest. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was personal. Noah emerged from the station, his coat slung over one arm, his sharp eyes meeting hers. Captain's green-lit it, he said, his voice steady. Old Mill Lane's our target. Victor's notebook points there, and he's agreed to cooperate under pressure. You ready? Elena nodded, flipping open the notebook to the scribbled entry, Pickup point, Old Mill Lane. More than ready, she replied, her tone firm. If that's where this operation's hiding, we're shutting it down. For Whisper. Noah's lips twitched in a faint smile, and he jerked his head toward the cruiser. Let's move. The drive to Old Mill Lane was tense, the cruiser cutting through the twilight as Elena briefed the team. Noah, 2 backup officers, and Maya Torres, who'd insisted on joining from animal control. Victor said they move around, Elena explained, her voice steady over the hum of the engine. Warehouses, barns, places like this. If Old Mill's active, we'll find evidence, maybe more cats. Be ready for anything. Maya, seated in the back, clutched a medical kit, her dark eyes resolute. If there are more like Whisper, we'll get them out, she said, and Elena felt a surge of gratitude for her ally. Old Mill Lane wound through a forgotten stretch of Crestwood, its potholed road flanked by overgrown fields and skeletal trees. The barn loomed ahead, a dilapidated husk of weathered wood and rusted tin, its windows dark and jagged. Elena's pulse quickened as they parked a discreet distance away, cutting the lights to avoid detection. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and a faint sound, soft plaintive meows, drifted from the structure, chilling her to the bone. "Hear that?" she whispered, her hand on her holster. Noah nodded grimly. "We're not alone." They approached under cover of dusk, splitting into pairs, Elena and Noah at the main entrance, the others circling to the back. The barn's door hung ajar, creaking on its hinges as Elena nudged it open, her flashlight slicing through the gloom. The sight inside stopped her cold. Rows of cages lined the walls, stacked haphazardly, each one holding a cat, some pacing restlessly, others curled in defeated silence. Their fur ranged from sleek and exotic to patchy and dull, their eyes glinting with fear or resignation. The stench of filth and neglect hit her like a wave, and Elena's stomach churned, her grip tightening on the flashlight. "God," Maya breathed, stepping in behind her, her medical kit clattering softly. "How many are there?" Elena scanned the room, counting at least a dozen cages, maybe more in the shadows. "Too many," she muttered, her voice thick with anger. She moved closer, her light catching on a frail tabby in the nearest cage, its ribs stark against its sides, its meows echoing Whisper's desperate pleas. "We're getting you out," she promised, her words a vow as much to this cat as to the one that had started it all. Noah signaled the backup officers, who fanned out to secure the perimeter, their radios crackling with quiet updates. "No, one's here now," he said, his voice low as he examined a clipboard hanging on the wall, scrawled with dates, numbers, and cryptic codes. "But this place was active recently. Look, shipments, transactions. This is bigger than Victor let on." Eleanor joined him, her eyes narrowing at the entries. "Drop-offs, pickups. They're moving these cats like merchandise," she said, disgust lacing her tone. Whisper was one of their rejects. Maya was already at work, opening cages with trembling hands, her voice soft as she coaxed the cats out. "Hey, sweethearts, it's okay now," she murmured, lifting the frail tabby into her arms. Elena grabbed a blanket from Maya's kit, wrapping it around another cat, a sleek Siamese with haunted eyes, and felt its shivering ease under her touch. Each rescue fueled her, a quiet warmth battling the horror of the scene. These weren't just animals. They were survivors like Whisper, and she'd make sure they got their chance. Noah's radio buzzed, the backup team reporting movement outside, a vehicle retreating down the lane. "They're onto us," he said, his jaw tightening. "We need to wrap this up fast." Elena nodded, her mind racing. "Get the evidence, photos, that clipboard, anything we can use. Maya, how many can we take now?" Maya glanced at the cats clustering around her, her expression resolute. "All of them. I'll call in more vans. We're not leaving a single one behind." As the team worked, Eleanor's flashlight caught on a small crate in the corner, half hidden by a tarp. She pulled it aside, her breath catching as she found a notebook identical to Victor's, more dates, more locations, a web spreading beyond Crestwood. "Noah," she called, holding it up. "This is it, their network, we've got them." He grinned, a rare crack in his calm facade. "Good work, Harper. This could blow it wide open." The barn hummed with urgency as they loaded the cats into the cruiser and Maya's van, their meows a chorus of fragile hope. Eleanor paused by the frail tabby, stroking its head as it nestled into the blanket. "You're safe now," she whispered, her thoughts drifting to Whisper, her spark, her guide. The fog might have lifted, but the shadows of this operation stretched far, and Elena knew this was just the beginning. With the notebook in hand and the cats in tow, she climbed into the cruiser, her heart full of purpose. Whisper had led her here, and she wouldn't stop until every cage was empty. The night air buzzed with quiet triumph as the cruiser rolled back into Crestwood, its headlights cutting through the last wisps of fog. Officer Elena Harper sat in the passenger seat, the second notebook from the barn clutched in her lap, its pages a tangled web of secrets waiting to be unraveled. In the back, a few of the rescued cats mewed softly, their frail bodies wrapped in blankets, while Maya Torres followed in the animal control van with the rest. The barn on Old Mill Lane had been a grim revelation. Cages, neglect, a breeding operation stretching beyond Victor Grayson's shaky confession, but Elena felt a flicker of warmth amid the darkness. Whisper's fight had led them here, and now dozens more had a chance because of it. At the station, the team gathered in the briefing room, the air thick with exhaustion and determination. Detective Noah Sullivan spread the new notebook's pages across the table, his sharp eyes tracing the scrawled entries, dates, locations, coded initials. "This is bigger than we thought," he said, his voice low but firm. Victor was a small fry. These notes point to a network, multiple sites. We've got a real shot at taking it down. Elena nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of a page marked Shipment 3, Rare Breed. Whisper was one of their rejects, she murmured. But what about the others? Maya stepped in, her medical kit slung over her shoulder, her expression a mix of weariness and resolve. "I've got the cats at the clinic with Dr. Ellis. Most are stable, but they're in rough shape. I'll head back soon, but I wanted to hear this first." Elena gave her a grateful nod, then turned to Noah. "Anything on Old Mill Lane itself?" He tapped a photo from the raid, a clipboard listing recent drop-offs. "Last shipment was 2 days ago. They're still active, just scattered. We need to move fast before they vanish again." Elena's phone buzzed, and she answered it quickly, her heart lifting at Maya's voice on the other end. "Elena, it's about Whisper," Maya said, a note of excitement breaking through her fatigue. "Dr. Ellis just called. It's doing better. Fluids are helping, and they've cleaned the wounds. It's still weak, but it's fighting." Elena exhaled, a smile tugging at her lips. "That's my girl," she said softly, the warmth spreading through her chest. "Thanks, Maya. Tell it I'll visit soon." She hung up, the news steadying her as she faced the team. "Whisper's holding on. We owe it more than ever now." Noah flipped to another page in the notebook, his brow furrowing. "Hold up, there's something here." "Marker check, UV. What's that mean?" Eleanor's mind flashed to Whisper's raw neck, the twine collar's cruel bite, and a hunch stirred. "Maya at the clinic. Can they check the cats under a UV light? Victor said Whisper didn't turn out right. Maybe there's more to it." Maya's eyes widened, catching on. "You think they marked them, like a brand?" Eleanor nodded. "If they're breeding for profit, rare breeds, high buyers, they might tag them somehow." Maya grabbed her phone, dialing Dr. Ellis as she stepped aside. The room fell silent, the weight of the possibility settling over them, until Maya returned, her face pale but her voice steady. "You were right, Elena. Dr. Ellis checked Whisper under UV. There's a faint symbol on its skin near the neck, barely visible without the light, like a tattoo. He's checking the others now. But it's not random. It matches a case I saw years ago. Trafficking ring, rare animals. They used markers to track bloodlines." Elena's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the notebook. "A trafficking ring," she repeated, the words sinking in. "Whispers. Not just a reject, it's evidence." Noah leaned forward, his voice urgent. "If that symbol ties to a known network, we've got a thread to pull." "Maya, what else do you remember about that case?" Maya frowned, piecing it together. "It went cold. Big players, overseas connections. They bred exotic cats, sold them to collectors. Shut down here, but maybe it's back." The room crackled with energy as the breakthrough landed. Eleanor's mind raced. Whisper's fragile frame, its trusting eyes, now a key to something vast and sinister. She grabbed her phone again, calling the captain. "Sir, we've got a lead. UV markers on the cats linking to an old trafficking case. We need resources to trace this." The captain's gruff voice came through. "You've got it, Harper. Bring me everything, notebooks, photos. We're escalating this now." Noah gathered the evidence, his movements brisk, while Eleanor turned to Maya. Head back to the clinic. Keep those cats safe and document every marker you find. There are proof. Maya nodded, her jaw set. I'm on it. Whisper's tougher than it looks. It's like it knew you'd find this. Eleanor smiled faintly, the thought warming her despite the stakes. It's been leading us all along. As Maya left, Eleanor and Noah pored over the notebooks, cross-referencing the Barnes clipboard with Victor's entries. One line stood out. Next drop, Quarry Yard 48 HRs. Eleanor tapped it, her pulse quickening. 2 days from now could be our chance to catch them in the act. Noah's eyes gleamed with focus. A sting! We'd need backup, surveillance. Captain'll have to move fast. Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we make it happen, for Whisper and every cat in that barn. The station hummed with purpose as they briefed the captain, the notebooks and photos laid out like a battle plan. Whisper's survival, its hidden marker, had cracked the case wide open, and Elena felt a quiet pride swell within her. She'd stopped that sedan on a hunch, heard a faint meow through the fog, and now they were on the cusp of dismantling a network that thrived on cruelty. The cats from Old Mill Lane were safe, Whisper was fighting, and the truth was within reach. As she left the room, Eleanor whispered to herself, "Hang on, little one. We're just getting started." The moon hung low over Crestwood, casting a silver sheen across the rugged stretch of Quarry Road. Officer Elena Harper crouched behind a cluster of pines, her breath fogging in the crisp night air as she peered through binoculars. The sting operation was in full swing. 2 days after the breakthrough at the station, the team had mobilized fast. Guided by the notebook's cryptic note, "Next drop, Quarry Yard 48 HRs." The abandoned quarry loomed ahead, its jagged cliffs and shadowed pits a perfect hideout for the trafficking ring. Elena's heart pounded, but beneath the adrenaline burned a steady warmth. Whisper's fight had brought them here, and she wouldn't let it down. Detective Noah Sullivan knelt beside her, his sharp eyes scanning the perimeter, while a dozen officers and federal agents fanned out in the darkness, their positions marked by faint radio crackles. Maya Torres waited in a van a quarter-mile back, ready with medical supplies for any cats they'd find. "Surveillance picked up movement an hour ago," Noah whispered, his voice taut. "Trucks inbound. This is it." Eleanor nodded, her fingers tightening on the binoculars. "Let's make it count for Whisper and the others." The plan was tight. Wait for the drop, catch the traffickers mid-transaction, and secure the animals. The UV marker on Whisper had linked it to a notorious ring, and the Barnes evidence had given them Quarry Road. Elena's mind flashed to the clinic, where Whisper was clawing its way back to life, its faint purr a beacon through the fog of this case. She'd called Maya earlier, hearing the relief in her voice. It's eating now, small bites, but it's a start. That resilience fueled Elena now, steadying her as headlights pierced the night. 2 trucks rumbled into view, their engines growling as they parked near a cluster of storage containers. Men spilled out, 5, maybe 6, hauling crates from the cargo beds, their movements brisk and practiced. Eleanor's binoculars caught the glint of cages inside, and a soft meow drifted through the stillness, tugging at her heart. "Cats," she breathed, her voice thick with resolve. "They're here." Noah signaled the team, his radio buzzing low. "Hold positions. Wait for my mark." The traffickers worked fast, stacking crates beside the containers, their gruff voices carrying snippets of orders. "Check the markers. Move the exotics first." Elena's pulse spiked. Markers like whispers. This was the proof they needed. A third vehicle rolled up, a sleek SUV, and a man stepped out, his posture commanding, his coat pristine against the quarry's grit. "Boss?" Noah muttered, and Elena nodded, her gut screaming yes. He barked instructions, inspecting a crate with a flashlight, and the UV glow revealed faint symbols on the cats inside, identical to Whisper's. "Now," Noah hissed into the radio, and the night erupted. Officers surged from the trees, flashlights, slicing through the dark, voices booming, "Police, hands up!" The traffickers froze, then scattered, some bolting for the trucks, others drawing weapons. Eleanor sprinted forward, her focus on the crates, her shout cutting through the chaos. "Secure the animals!" Gunfire cracked, warning shots from the feds, and the boss dove for the SUV, but Noah tackled him, pinning him to the dirt. "You're done?" Noah growled, cuffing him as backup swarmed the others. Elena reached the crates, her hands trembling as she pried one open. A chorus of meows greeted her, frightened, frail, but alive. She lifted a small black cat, its UV marker glowing, faintly, and wrapped it in her jacket, its shivering easing against her warmth. "You're okay," she murmured, her voice cracking with relief. Maya's van screeched up and she leapt out, her medical kit in hand. "How many?" she called, rushing to Elena's side. "Dozens," Elena replied, passing the cat to her. "More with markers, same as Whisper." The scene blurred with action, officers cuffing suspects, agents cataloging evidence, Maya and her team tending to the cats. Elena moved crate to crate, her flashlight catching on a litter of kittens in the last one, their tiny bodies marked with the same eerie glow. "They're experimenting," she said, her voice shaking as she handed them to Maya. "Like Whisper. Bred. For something specific." Maya's jaw tightened, but her hands were gentle as she nestled the kittens in a carrier. "We'll figure it out. For now, they're safe." The boss glared from the ground, his defiance unbroken even in cuffs, but Elena ignored him, her focus on the cats. The quarry grew quiet as the last suspect was detained. The truck seized, the crates emptied. Noah approached, dusting off his hands. "Big haul, evidence, suspects, and a ledger from the SUV. We've got names now." Elena nodded, her eyes on the kittens. "Whisper started this," she said softly. "It's tying it all together." Maya joined them, wiping sweat from her brow. "These cats are rough, but they'll make it, thanks to you." Elena managed, a tired smile, the weight of the night lifting slightly. "Thanks to Whisper, it's the fighter here." The team loaded the cats into the vans, their meows a fragile symphony of hope, and Elena climbed into the cruiser, the ledger in Noah's. Hands a promise of justice. The quarry faded behind them, but the fight wasn't over, just sharper now, lit by a tiny cat's courage. As they drove back, Elena's phone buzzed. Maya again. "Whisper's up," she said, her voice bright, purring like it knows you're out there. Elena laughed softly, the sound warming her through. "Tell it we got him," she said, and hung up, her heart full. Quarry Road had been a victory, but it was Whisper's whisper that had led them through the fog, and she'd see this through for every cat they'd saved tonight. The sun rose over Crestwood, painting the hills in soft gold as the animal control. Van rolled up to the sanctuary's gates. Officer Elena Harper stepped out, her boots crunching on the gravel path, the exhaustion of Quarry Road's sting clinging to her like a second skin. Behind her, Maya Torres guided the rescued cats, dozens of them, from frail kittens to wary adults, into the sanctuary's care, their meows a fragile chorus of relief. The ledger from the SUV rested in Noah Sullivan's hands back at the station, a roadmap to dismantling the trafficking ring. But here, Elena's focus was on the lives they'd saved. Whisper's courage had sparked this, and now these cats had a home. The sanctuary sprawled across a quiet valley, its enclosures nestled among wildflowers and whispering pines. Maya had called ahead, and the staff greeted them with open arms, veterinarians, volunteers, all bustling with purpose. "This place is a haven," Maya said, her voice warm as she carried a crate of kittens, their UV markers faintly visible, in the morning light. "They'll heal here." Elena nodded, lifting a trembling tabby from the van, its wide eyes softening as she stroked its patchy fur. "They deserve it," she murmured, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. Whisper would too. They moved the cats into a spacious intake room, its walls lined with padded beds and sunlit windows. Helena watched as a volunteer coaxed a sleek Siamese from its cage, its haughty glare melting into a tentative purr under gentle hands. Each rescue was a victory, a thread of hope woven from the chaos of the quarry. Maya knelt beside a litter of kittens, checking their frail bodies with practiced care. "These little ones are fighters," she said, glancing up at Elena. "Like Whisper. Dr. Ellis called. They're keeping it overnight, but it's stronger every hour." Elena's heart lifted, a smile breaking through her fatigue. "That's my girl," she said softly, the news a balm after the night's battle. She set the tabby in a bed, its shivering easing as it curled into the warmth, and joined Maya by the kittens. "Those markers," she said, nodding at the faint UV glow on their fur. "They're all tied to Whispers, aren't they?" Maya nodded, her expression grim. "Yeah, Dr. Ellis confirmed it. Same pattern, same ring. They're breeding. For something, rarity, maybe profit. We'll figure it out." As the last cat settled, a staff member approached, her face lit with curiosity. "Maya, Elena, you need to see this one. Came in with the quarry group, but it's different." She led them to a secluded enclosure, its gate creaking as she pushed it open. Inside stood a cat unlike any Elena had seen, its fur a shimmering silver, its eyes a piercing green that seemed to glow with an uncanny intelligence. It paced gracefully, its sleek form radiating strength, and Elena's breath caught. "What is that?" She whispered, stepping closer. "Luna," Maya said, naming it on the spot, her voice tinged with awe. "No UV marker, but look at it. Too perfect, too rare. It's not natural." Elena crouched by the fence, her hand outstretched, and Luna paused, its gaze locking onto hers with a depth that sent a shiver down her spine. "Experimental?" she asked, her mind racing back to the quarry's crates, the traffickers' muttered orders about exotics. Maya nodded slowly. "Maybe. It's healthy, stronger than the others. Could be their prize or something new." Luna tilted its head, a low melodic growl rumbling from its throat, not threatening but knowing, as if it understood the weight of their words. Elena's fingers brushed the fence, and Luna pressed its head against the bars, its silver fur cool and soft. "You're a mystery," she murmured, a warmth blooming in her chest. "But you're safe now." Maya smiled faintly, watching the exchange. "Whisper led us to the quarry, and now Luna's here. These cats, they're connected, aren't they?" Elena stood, her resolve deepening. "Yeah, Whisper's the spark, but Luna's something else. We need to protect them, all of them." The sanctuary hummed around them, volunteers tending to the cats, the air filled with soft purrs and rustling leaves. Elena felt a quiet peace settle over her, tempered by the knowledge that the fight wasn't over. The ledger was with Noah, the traffickers in custody, but Luna's presence hinted at depths they hadn't yet plumbed. Maya's phone buzzed, and she answered with a quick, "Torres." Her face brightened as she listened, then hung up, turning to Elena. "Whisper's awake, purring up a storm. Dr. Ellis says it's a miracle." Elena laughed, the sound light and free, cutting through the sanctuary's calm. "That's no miracle, that's Whisper. Tell them I'll stop by tonight." Maya nodded, her eyes warm. It's like it knew we'd win this round. Elena glanced back at Luna, who watched her with those piercing eyes, a silent guardian among the rescued. "Whisper started this," she said, her voice steady, "but Luna's part of it too. They're why we keep going." The sanctuary gates clanged shut behind them, locking out the world's shadows, and Elena felt a bond forming, not just with Whisper, but with every cat here, especially the silver enigma pacing its enclosure. The fog might have cleared, but the path ahead glowed with purpose, lit by the lives they'd saved and the mysteries they'd yet to unravel. Twilight draped the Crestwood Sanctuary in a soft purple hush, the air alive with the rustle of leaves and the distant purrs of settling cats. Officer Elena Harper stood by Luna's enclosure, her fingers brushing the silver cat's head through the bars, its piercing green eyes locking onto hers with an unspoken trust. The sanctuary had become a haven in the days since Quarry Road, Whisper thriving at the clinic, the rescued cats healing under Maya Torres's care, and the ledger's secrets unraveling at the station with Detective Noah Sullivan. But the peace felt fragile, a thin veneer over the storm Elena knew was brewing. The traffickers wouldn't let their network crumble without a fight. Her radio crackled, Noah's voice cutting through the calm. "Elena, we've got chatter. Suspects from the Sting are talking. They're planning to hit the sanctuary, take back the cats. Tonight." Elena's stomach tightened, her hand dropping from Luna's fur. "How long?" she asked, her voice steady despite the jolt. Hours, maybe less, Noah replied. Feds are mobilizing, but we need to hold the line. I'm on my way. She clicked off, her gaze sweeping the sanctuary, volunteers feeding cats, the quiet hum of life, and felt a surge of protectiveness. Not on my watch, she muttered, turning to find Maya. Maya was in the intake room, bandaging a tabbies. Poor, her dark hair falling into her eyes. Trouble? She asked, catching Eleanor's expression. Big trouble, Eleanor said, briefing her quickly. They're coming for the cats. Luna, the marked ones, all of them. We've got to lock this place down. Maya's jaw set, her hands pausing mid-rap. Then we fight. These cats aren't going back. Elena nodded, a quiet warmth blooming at Maya's resolve. Noah's bringing backup, but we hold until then. Get the staff, barricade the gates, secure the enclosures. The sanctuary transformed in minutes, volunteers bolting gates and piling crates against the fences, their faces grim but determined. Eleanor armed herself with a tranquilizer gun, Maya at her side with a flashlight and a fierce glint in her eye. Luna paced her enclosure, her silver fur glinting as if sensing the tension, while the other cats huddled in their beds, their meows a nervous undertone. Elena's phone buzzed, Maya's update from the clinic. Whispers purring like crazy, like it knows you're out there. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Hang on, little one, we've got this." Headlights pierced the dusk, 3 black SUVs roaring up the lane, their engines a menacing growl. Elena's pulse spiked as she signaled the team, volunteers ducking. Low, staff ready with makeshift defenses. The vehicles stopped short of the gate and men spilled out, 6, maybe 7, masked and armed, their movements swift and cold. "Open the gates," one barked, his voice muffled by a scarf. "Hand over the cats and no one gets hurt." Eleanor stepped forward, her tranquilizer gun raised, her voice ringing out. "This is a sanctuary. You're trespassing. Leave now, or you'll regret it." The leader laughed, a chilling sound, and gestured to his men. "Take it," he snarled, and they advanced, crowbars glinting as they pried at the gate. Elena fired a dart, striking one in the shoulder. He staggered but stayed upright, his snarl twisting into rage. The gate groaned under their assault, and Maya shouted, "Hold them!" Volunteers hurled water buckets and tools, a desperate barrage, but the men pushed through, splintering the wood. Eleanor's heart raced. This was it, the final stand. Then a fierce growl cut through the chaos. Luna, leaping from her unlocked enclosure, her silver form a blur as she landed between Helena and the intruders. Her teeth bared, her eyes blazing, she lunged at the nearest man, knocking him back with a guttural snarl. The traffickers faltered, their bravado cracking. "What the hell is that?" one stammered, stumbling over a crate. Elena seized the moment, firing another dart, this one dropping a second man as Luna prowled, her presence a shield. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, Noah and the feds closing in. The leader cursed, his mask slipping as he barked, "Fall back!" But Luna charged again, her growl a thunderous warning, and the men scattered, tripping over each other in their haste. Eleanor and Maya pressed forward, tranquilizers popping, until the SUVs screeched away, leaving 2 intruders unconscious on the ground. The gate hung crooked, but the sanctuary stood firm, its defenders breathless and triumphant. Noah's cruiser roared up, feds swarming the scene, cuffing the fallen men as Elena caught her breath. Luna returned to her side, pressing her head against Elena's leg, her purr low and steady. "You saved us," Elena whispered, stroking her silver fur, a warmth flooding her chest. Maya joined them, her face flushed with adrenaline. "They're gone. For now. The cats are safe." Eleanor nodded, glancing at the enclosures, the cats peering out with wide, trusting eyes. "Thanks to Luna and all of us." Noah approached, the ledger in hand, his grin sharp. "Caught 'em fleeing, got names, plates. This ledger's the key. We're cracking the network wide open." Elena's resolve hardened, her hand resting on Luna's head. "Good. Whisper. Started this, Luna defended it. We finish it." The feds secured the scene, the sanctuary buzzing with relief, and Elena felt a quiet pride settle over her. The fog had lifted long ago, but the light here, forged by a tiny cat's plea and a silver guardian's courage, shone brighter than ever. As the stars emerged, Elena stood by Luna's enclosure, the silver cat watching her with that knowing gaze. "We did it," she said softly, her thoughts drifting to Whisper purring at the clinic. The traffickers had struck, but they'd lost, this round at least. With the ledger in play and the team united, the fight was far from over. But for tonight, the sanctuary held strong, a testament to the bonds that had carried them through. The dawn broke over Crestwood in a blaze of amber and pink, bathing the sanctuary in a glow that felt like a promise kept. Officer Elena Harper stood at the heart of the compound, her hands in her pockets, the crisp air carrying the soft purrs of cats stirring in their enclosures. The night's chaos, the traffickers, failed raid, Luna's fierce stand, had settled into a quiet victory, the sanctuary's gates patched and its spirit unbroken. Detective Noah Sullivan was back at the station, the ledger from Quarry Road now a weapon in the Fed's hands, its coded names and transactions unraveling the trafficking network piece by piece. But here, amidst the wildflowers and pines, Elena felt the true weight of what they'd achieved, and it all traced back to a faint meow in the fog. Maya Torres emerged from the intake room, her dark hair tousled, but her smile bright. "The cats are settling in," she said, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Those kittens from the quarry, they're eating like champs now." Elena grinned, her exhaustion softening at the news. "Good. They've earned it?" Her gaze drifted to Luna's enclosure, where the silver cat lounged in a patch of sunlight, her piercing green eyes watching the world with a calm that belied her ferocity. "And her?" Elena asked, nodding toward Luna. Maya chuckled. "Luna's the queen. Around here, keeps the others in line. She's special, Elena, they all are." The sanctuary staff buzzed around them, volunteers repairing fences, veterinarians checking the rescued cats, each one a survivor of the ring's cruelty. Elena's phone buzzed, and she answered to Dr. Ellis's warm voice. "Whisper's ready to come home, purring like a motor, gaining weight. Do you want to pick it up?" Elena's heart swelled, a laugh escaping her. "Home? You bet I do. I'll be there soon." She hung up, turning to Maya. "Whisper's cleared. I'm bringing it here." Maya's eyes lit up. Perfect. This place wouldn't be the same without its spark. Hours later, Elena returned with Whisper cradled in her arms, its grey and white fur soft and clean, its once frail body filling out with every determined purr. She set it down near Luna's enclosure, and the silver cat rose, padding to the fence with a low, welcoming growl. Whisper's ears perked, its wide eyes meeting Luna's, and it darted forward, pressing its tiny head against the bars. Luna mirrored the gesture, their noses touching through the metal, a silent bond forming between the spark and the guardian. Elena's throat tightened, a warmth spreading through her as she watched. "You too," she murmured. "You're unstoppable." The sanctuary's legacy grew in the weeks that followed. The ledger's revelations sparked raids across state lines, dismantling the trafficking ring's hubs, warehouses emptied, animals freed, and names like Victor Grayson's boss facing justice. Noah called one evening, his voice triumphant. "We've got the ringleader. International ties, big money, it's over, Harper." Eleanor smiled, standing by Whisper's new bed in the sanctuary's main room. "Not over," she said softly. "Just beginning." The world took notice. News crews flocked to Crestwood, cameras capturing Luna's majestic silver form and Whisper's quiet resilience, their story a rallying cry for wildlife protection. Donations poured in, expanding the sanctuary. New enclosures rose. A clinic opened on site and schools visited, kids wide-eyed as Maya told them how one cat's plea had changed everything. Eleanor spoke at a press conference, her voice steady. "This started with Whisper, a traffic stop in the fog. It's proof that even the smallest life can spark a revolution, if we listen." Whisper thrived, its purrs a constant hum as it roamed the sanctuary, often curling up beside Luna's enclosure. The silver cat watched over it like a sentinel, their friendship a symbol of the bonds that had carried them through, cat to cat, human to human. Elena found herself there most days, her uniform swapped for jeans on off hours, her hands gentle as she scratched Whisper's ears. "You did this," she'd whisper, and Whisper would blink up at her, its trust unshaken, its spirit a quiet fire. One crisp autumn morning, Eleanor stood with Maya and Noah by the sanctuary's observation deck, the valley stretching below in a tapestry of gold and green. Luna lounged nearby, her silver fur catching the sun, while Whisper chased a leaf, its playful pounce drawing laughs from the trio. "Look at them," Maya said, her voice soft with wonder. "From that sedan to this." Noah nodded, his sharp features softened by a rare grin. "You started it, Harper. One stop, one cat, now a legacy." Eleanor's eyes traced the sanctuary, cats basking in the sun, volunteers laughing, the air alive with hope, and felt a lump rise in her throat. "No," she said, her voice steady but thick. "Whisper started it. Luna defended it. We just followed." She crouched, scooping Whisper into her arms, its purr rumbling against her chest. Luna rose, pressing her head to Elena's knee, and for a moment the three of them stood together, partners in a fight that had rewritten their world. The sanctuary became more than a refuge. It was a beacon. People came from miles away, drawn by the story of a tiny cat's courage and a silver guardian's strength, leaving with a promise to protect the vulnerable. Elena stayed on, her badge a shield for those who couldn't speak, her heart tethered to Whisper and Luna. The fog of that first day was a distant memory, replaced by a clarity forged in trust and triumph. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the valley, Eleanor whispered to her companions, "You changed everything." And in their quiet, knowing gazes, she saw the truth. They'd changed her too.